It's tabletop time.
I'm Jazza.
I'm Dave.
I'm El.
I'm Murray.
And I'm Jen.
And we have a very exciting announcement.
It's up there.
Ta-da.
I don't know where to point. There. It's Gateway Roleplay.
Jazzer, it's above you.
So this has been in the works for, it's been over a year.
No.
It's been over a
Sure.
year. Because it was being played.
Well, you came real quick.
I don't remember.
Play tested at PAX last year. And
Oh
it
my
will have
God.
been in development for 6 months before then.
We did, because Call to Quest started around
Call to Quest was a year ago.
June
I had a reminder that it was a year ago.
There you go. That was Gateway.
And we were developing leading up to it. So it was about a year and a half in development, and we finally have the first version of the alpha, which is officially out to patrons. So it is. We've sent the link. It's to all patron tiers. So if you're curious, we're going to go through a bit of it today. So you'll know if it sounds like something you're interested in. I think the biggest thing to point out, though, is it's going to be actively developed. Not only are we playtesting it every week, but we're very excited about all the stuff we're going to be adding. But even in its current state, there are some holes and there's stuff that needs tweaking or fixing. There is so much already just to start off with. And this video is a bit of a chance for us to just sort of talk about some of the stuff that's interesting about Gateway Roleplay for those of you who are interested. But I guess maybe before that, do you want to explain the website so people would know where to check it out? Or
I think that's a you explaining that. The website? Yeah, tell us about the website, Jazza. I'll tell everyone about something else.
go to gatecrashgames.com.
Do you want me to bring it up? Is that what?
Yeah.
Oh, that I understand. Like, do you want it? He's like, can you change the tab? Yeah.
There we go. Oh, no, wrong.
no,
It
that
wasn't that one. Yeah, okay. So if
That one.
Yeah. So even if you don't sign up as a patron, you can sign up to the newsletter. That is completely free. So head over to gatewayroleplay.com, which redirects to gatecrashgames.com. And you can sign up for the newsletter, or there's a link there to our Patreon. So you can be kept in the loop. And you also can sign up as a patron without paying. So it is worth pointing that out. You can just be a free patron member, but all paid tiers will get access to the alpha as we develop it in early access. And we're just going to go through a little bit of what's included in that.
And be able to play test as well and provide feedback.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a
That's why you
higher
get the
tier.
alpha.
There's a higher tier for people who want deeper access. There's a Discord chat that we post random. I often post random stuff in there.
Dave likes to sprinkle tidbits.
But we'll be posting more. Like, we kind of had to get the alpha to a point, and then it will be easier to just be like, I made this for this. Probably for last week's. I made this for last week's session. Dump. That sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
What is Gatecrash Games? What is Gateway Game? What is Gateway Roleplay?
What is Gateway?
My shoe just fell off.
Dave,
He's revealed the...
what did we say about the feet?
It's a little meta, but basically Gatecrash Games is a game company that is developing Gateway Roleplay. And Gatecrash, a different game, was starting development much longer before Gateway Roleplay, but we came to a point where we knew we wanted to develop our own in-house roleplay system, and we decided to do it as part of the Gatecrash Games setup because there's a meta and sort of in-universe lore that we're tying into the magic system and basically just the core rules to keep it all connected in the universe, because it's also the universe that we'll be playing a Lucifera in. So it's just like a way for us to, in a similar way that like D&D has the Sword Coast and all of that, we want to build a system that you can apply to anything, but also to give it a home so that when we share it with people, there's a place that you can play in without needing to, come up with your own if you want to join in ours.
Why Gateway Roleplay? Well, previously on the channel, we had played Cogent Roleplay, which is a system that Jazza and his brother had developed together. And it was developed many, many years ago and free and open source and wonderful, and people can check that out. But once the channel was regular posting, it became very evident that we needed something we could work on, something that I could put my flair into as well, because, of course, as the primary GM, it's got to be a system that works for us and something that we can really sink our teeth into and make perfect for the tables that we play at. That's the thing with role-playing games. There's a lot of them out there, and it's about finding the one that works for you. There is no perfect answer. None of them, not even Gateway Roleplay, will be the perfect answer for everybody. We just hope we can make a game that we love and you can love, and we can develop and work on and do really cool stuff with. So, should we take people through some features?
Dive right in.
Cool. I think we'll start off with the character sheet, which is, I think, the first thing that people get a vibe for how a system works or how it's structured. It's kind of the backbone of how it all comes together. Roles in Gateway Roleplay are a dice pool based system based in D6s, where the amount of dice you roll is either against another person's roll in combat or against a challenge level. And the amount of successful dice, where every dice has a 50-50 chance of success, determines whether you're successful or not. So basically then, how roles work is, I think this is one of the most interesting parts about our system. It's a universal rule where your role is comprised of a skill stat and a trait stat at all times. So if you're doing a skill check, your skills are nested in your traits. So strength, for example, has 3 skills within it: power, fitness, and resistance. So if you're trying to bash down a door, you say, oh, GM, I want to bash down the door. He might say, make a power check. And then you're combining your power dice number with your strength dice number. But the reason this is a really cool system is it allows for really fun mix and match combinations. So you're not always like, make a stealth check, make a perception check, make a perception check, make a perception check.
Now, it's worth noting that, because it hasn't been mentioned, it's a dice pool system. So basically...
You did mention
You
it.
did mention that?
I did say it.
Okay, my brain isn't working. Wow. Do you know what a dice pool system is?
Make an intelligence check.
Viewers? Have we said what a dice pool
Based
system
on the
is?
number of
Dave's brain is
D6s.
pooling
I
right
literally explained
And
the
you
dice
roll-
pool system.
Did you?
D6s.
There you go. You don't need me here.
Hey, we appreciate you either way.
Do you want to explain the pairings? Because this was
Explain the esoteric pairings for us.
yeah.
So the example of bashing down a door. So the standard test would be, you roll power and then you just pair it with the strength that it's nested in. But let's say you have a different character who has a different solution for taking down the door. I want to use this crowbar to like lever the door off its hinges and crack it into the building and, basically dislodge it. A lot of old doors, you could actually lift them up and they'd fall out of their housings. How do I do that? Well, I want to use my engineering because I'm using a lever, I'm using my brains, I'm using mechanical advantage. Cool, I want to roll engineering. Well, I'm going to say, you don't automatically pair that with intelligence because you got to use your body. So I might say, okay, pair that with strength. So you'll say, I want to make an engineering check, and I'll say, cool, make an engineering strength check because you're using a lever. And yeah, you've now found a different way to break down the door.
It's fun in both directions. It's fun for the GM because you can be like, rather than just saying make a perception check or roll stealth, you can be like, make an acuity intelligence check. Or maybe an acuity reflexes. Well, acuity reflexes is the default.
One of the things that was really important when we were making the skills is trying to make a skill system where all the skills felt balanced. There weren't ones we lean on. I've got a lot of experience playing role-playing games, but especially many, many, many years playing D&D, and a lot of people at the table have. And there are certain skills that are weighted to be a lot more frequently used than others, hence us breaking up things like acuity, referencing the... we've referenced it twice already, referencing the strength of the senses, your smell, your vision, your physicality side of perception, and as separate to the mental side. So often that'll be paired in different ways. If you're smelling out someone, you might be using acuity, but if you're reaming through documents trying to find someone, you might be investigation.
And not only that, hands up if you're listening at home and at a D&D party, someone's already gone, okay, we need to do X check, who is good at that?
Yeah.
And you always allocate one party member to the best thing that they're good at. Well, this sort of gives the opportunity for you individually to role play how your character would solve such a task, not just relying on the best person.
I
with the
don't
most
have stealth,
perception.
so I won't try. Yeah.
And that's kind of innate to humans, right? Most people aren't going to assume that someone else is like going to A, be incapable of doing a task, or B, immediately better than them at doing the task. Like I think boldly most people in basic scenarios, especially capable adventurers, are going to assume they can do something. Like you might say,
Or
oh, there's a
try.
bank vault. We'll get the lock picker for the bank vault. But like when it comes to can you turn the door handle, like, yeah, you know, you're going to turn the door handle.
There's also, as part of our system, we have what's called pitched skill checks, where basically players can sort of propose the pairing based on how their character might play that out. So I think the example that we actually experienced was in Call to Quest, climbing down the crumbly hill, and we all made a different check to make it down the hill. Does anyone remember the pairings?
Well, someone jumped with power.
I think it was
I think it was you.
Yeah.
And then there was someone else who was using agility to
Yeah.
do it like agilely.
Yeah.
And then because you were old, maybe you were using something else.
I think it was wisdom.
Yeah, or
because it's like
where
carefully
to put
testing
your
the
hand.
stones. and-
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course,
some of
So
like,
you approach it all differently, a different flavor for your character.
and it makes complete sense because
Yeah.
while we're all required to roll agility paired with a trait, we get to sort of say, hey, I would pair it with wisdom, or I would pair it with finesse, or whatever it is. And
Adds
like
a bit more flavor.
Yeah, it doesn't immediately skew it to I have an advantage now, but it actually lets you play to your strength in a way where, like, okay, well, if agility isn't my strength, if I have 1 point in agility, but hey, I have 3 points in wisdom, it makes sense that your character would be someone who would, like, I can see where the rocks are weak, I can see where the path is down, and allow you to role play in that way, which is pretty fun and I think quite unique in terms of role playing games.
Sometimes, though, a check will be a check. The GM has to count in and say, occasionally they will be very specific. And it will be like, yeah, this particular task requires, you know.
And you have done that. You're like, no, you cannot
I'm afraid you
use
can't use-
deception
yeah.
to open a door.
Yeah, can I not use my deft of hand for the brain surgery that I'm currently performing? But you do need to use your hands' fine motor skills, I'm afraid. We can pair it with something else.
Let me quote from the core rulebook. Pitching skill checks is meant to allow players a way to participate in the flavoring and fun of scenarios. It is the responsibility of the player to pitch respectfully and quickly. Whether it is approved or not, accept the decision is up to the GM without argument. So it's
Important
not
clause.
meant to be a mechanic that gets you to strong arm everything to your advantage. It's
And
made
that's
to
no fun.
Exactly.
I will forever live with the reboot argument about Rob arguing that he shouldn't have had to use his sleight of hand or his finesse of hand to do robot brain surgery. I'm like, yes, you do.
What was he? He would have been pitching scholar.
He wanted to use intelligence paired with intelligence to look at the brain until it disassembled itself.
But
I love you, Rob.
This system actually works in the sense of saying you have to use deft of hand, but you can apply intelligence with that, or even your
absolutely.
skill.
Yeah.
So it's actually supporting that want,
Yeah.
but in a way that doesn't
within
break it.
boundaries, if it makes sense that there's boundaries.
Totally. All right. Well, I don't know if you want to just like skim through the rule book and if there's anything interesting or noteworthy, we can sort of.
The whole
do
thing's
we-
interesting
Do
and
we want
noteworthy.
to talk about how you would fill out the character
That's
sheet
a great one. Do you
while
want
we
to start
have
us
it
off?
up?
Let's do it.
I mean, there's
There's visual
technically
examples too if you
two.
scroll down.
I think. Is that okay?
Is that
No,
your
no.
visual?
Well, I think we're going to.
I
kick off-
liked the character sheet.
Yeah,
and
I
then
can
I'll
go
just
bring up the
like
character sheet. There you
vaguely
go.
pointed things.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I do is I like to work out and put the traits in. So if you want to scroll down a bit, Dave.
XP.
Yeah, to the XP. And I think I'm not sure if you guys have set a standard for where we're starting.
Can I
have.
spiel about that and then
Yeah.
you take the character sheet?
Spiel, my guy.
EXP. I just want to say this because we think it's really cool.
It is.
So in D&D, everyone knows that you start at level 4. I mean, you don't always, but so many people start at level 4. It's like standard to start at level 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Which is weird, right? You should start at level 1. Well, we start at level 8. So
9.
basically,
Tier 2, level 9.
very dead.
True.
Yeah.
I can't bring it up quite high enough.
That's all right. I'll just.
But basically, everything you need to know for getting better in the game, you don't have to flick through books. You don't have to go to a class. It's all here. So basically, as you level up, you just check these off and then you fill them out completely when you've spent them. So these are your EXP points. And as you hit milestones, you level up and you gain things. So you'll gain a trait, you'll copy and highlight, you'll gain a trait, you gain an attribute. So at level 0, if you wanted to start at level 1 with no experience, you would just get your 10 EXP
Very important. 10 free
and your
XP.
free feat.
Yeah.
And you would then put 1 attribute point in each stat, in each attribute.
Everything is 1 to start.
Everything
So
starts
you
at
get
1.
1 point for free
For
in
free.
everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
It
then,
doesn't cost any of your XP to just start at 1 for everything.
and if you want to start at any other point in the game, if you want to start at level 15, you just fill out all this experience and then you just go through and you know what traits to put in, you know what experience you've got to spend, and you just fill out the character sheet.
And the way you spend that is if you wanted to change your skill from 1 to 2, then you would just be spending 2 XP to get it to 2. If you then want to go from 2 to 3, you would be spending an additional 3 XP. So I just kind of went through and crossed off everything. So yeah, it's just a kind of a good way to work out your character at the start, see what they're good at. And it's a really nice way to balance your character as well, because if you want to be really good at something, it means you won't have, high stats for everything. You're going to have to give and take a little bit.
So you quickly rack up a lot of points sunk by going high in some skills. So going to skill number 2, 2 points to 3. That's 3. So you already sunk 5
Yeah.
into the 1 skill
That's a whole
point
one
just
of
to
those
go
blocks.
to skill 3.
And then if you want to go 4, then it's 9.
Yeah. And that's almost 2 sections. So
Yeah.
it does add up pretty quick.
But then you'll be really good at that
That's
role.
true. That one thing.
There's a bunch of other restrictions, caveats. We need to go into all of it right now in terms of just how you can level up, like caps on things, etc., based on your tier. But I did want to mention that you'll notice on the left there's a tier thing. You can barely see, but we mentioned tiers. Then there we go. We can see tier 0, tier 1, tier 2. That's your tiers of play. And the really cool thing is that everything is based off the same framework. So NPCs, monsters, all of those things are based on that tier system as well. So you know roughly that you have the same amount of stuff that you're working with as a character, but you have all your abilities and all these things that maybe the monsters don't have. But in terms of rough strength, it's all based off the same benchmark, except that monsters can go up to tier 10 and you can only go up to tier 5.
The tiers basically mean the amount of attribute points, mind and body that any given character has. So at tier 2, with the base of 1 in each, when you go from 0 to 1, you get another, and then 1 to 2, you get another. So at tier 2, you've technically got 4 attribute points, and you could put them so that you have 1 in body, 3 in mind, or 2 in both, or 1 in mind and 3 in body.
So the average like commoner with like a laborer, a not particularly skilled professional adult, would be a tier 1 character who would roughly have 2 points in everything on like even spread and 1 point in half. So like 2 points in one half and 1 point in another half. But it could be spread either way.
Yeah.
And so that's basically where people sit. And like an adventurer, a starting adventurer, or a skilled professional would just have 2 in everything as their benchmark, and then obviously bumped up and down from that to make them special.
A good quick start tip as well is if you're starting at tier 2, which is the sort of average or recommended, you can quick fill stuff in by putting everything at 2 points, mind, body, intelligence, and then all the stats and all that stuff. And that will have spent the amount of XP up to having 14 XP left to spend. But then you can also take some
Easy.
away
That's
from
the
places
less
to get some points back.
mathsy way.
Yeah,
If
exactly,
you want
yeah.
to avoid doing bit by bit.
That's the easy way.
Yeah. I think also worth noting that the mind and body, when you said you can make it 2 and 2 or like vary it,
3
is
and
that
1,
it
yeah.
affects your health and your spirit.
What is health and spirit?
That is a very good question, Dave. So, health is your total attribute points plus your body.
Yeah. So if you got 2
So do you
in
want to
each,
explain what that means?
if you got
Yeah.
2 mind and 2 body, that's a fairly average build to just start off with to be fairly broad.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get 2 plus 2. That's your attribute points is 4. Then you just add your body.
You
again.
add your body a
So you'd have
second
6
time.
health.
Yeah.
But if you had 3 body and 1 mind, that would be still 4 attribute points. But when you add the body a second time, you would then get 7 health.
Yeah.
But it does mean that functionally for every point of body you put in, you get 2 health. For every point of mind you put in, you get 1 health. That's really how it...
And then same in reverse.
But
for
then
spirit.
mind works a
doubled,
little
yeah.
better for spirit.
Yeah, reversed but doubled.
And then you double it.
So you get like
Yeah.
4 spirit for every 1 point of
In
mind,
mind.
and 2 for every 1 point of body.
Yeah. So health is fairly self-explanatory. That's how much damage you can take. Spirit is sort of the catch-all term for whether it's mana, stamina, whatever sort of resource that your character,
Energy.
whatever
Yeah.
your character is utilizing.
Yeah, a huge thing that we really wanted is to not have a divide between the sort of spellcasters and the melee users in terms of how their gameplay feels. Not the things they're capable of, because they're very, very different. It's just the idea of a really fun thing where you've got plenty of resources, you've got to manage it, you've got to spend it. One side isn't just attack, 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 while the other side is, picking their spells. The melee or the mundane combat classes all have really cool combat maneuvers. They can do interesting stuff with the same resource pool as a wizard has. And if a wizard maybe has a sword and a wand, they can do both. So they'll be spending the same resource to swing their sword and do cool maneuvers as they will be to Gandalf, basically.
And basically have a similar amount of choice. Like, combat and weapons in Gateway are so versatile and unique compared to a lot of role-playing systems out there, where your choice of weapons is basically, my sword +1 or my hammer or whatever it is. It's all the same thing. They do damage. Sometimes they do a bit more damage, and that's it. And then you just have your feats or your class build or whatever. We've created this so that you can essentially create your class, create your build, and the weapons all have different styles built into them. Where axes, for example, specialize in bleed, applying bleed damage, so that which is a condition where your opponent will lose health if they move or exert themselves too much in combat. So you're sort of like bleeding them out, so they have to sort of hold their wounds while they're fighting. And blunt weapons have break and stun capabilities where they can destroy armor and sort of destabilize the enemy. Swords are like the finesse and strategy with all sorts of different approaches.
Most of the time,
Yeah.
Which is really fun, because I wanted to just add it's more deep than even that, because while they have broad categories, within each there's different classes of weapon. So while you might be using a falchion or a saber with the sword skill and inflicting bleed and attacking multiple targets, you might also be using a rapier and, dueling and riposting and parrying. So even within, as you did mention with blunt, you said like stunning or breaking armor. Well, there's two different paths that you can take with blunt weapons, and you can do both. If you just heavily invest, if you're multi-classing, there's no classes, but
Do you want to
multi-training.
talk about training? And
what's training?
Rolls apply the same way with combat as they do with skill checks. So like skill plus trait. But in the case of combat, the skill is your training, your trained skill, and the trait is specified by the weapon you're using or trained in.
And the way you increase your training is the same way you increase your skills. So you're just putting points in them. It's costing XP the same way, 2 to get to 2, 3 to get to 3, and so on.
Yeah. The only difference is your first point of training is completely free. But if you train in extra schools of combat or whatever, like let's say I'm a sword user and I think I want to have a dagger. I want to do some backstabs and throat slits and that sort of thing. You can train in that. Your first point costs 5 XP, and then it scales normally. Point 2 costs 2, and so on. The idea
like
being
the equivalent
the
of
initial investment to
multi-classing.
learn a new path.
Yeah.
You sort of unlock that, because once you unlock it, even with like 1 point in something, the whole tree is there for you to sort of peruse. Anything you meet the requirements of, you can then do, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think a real layman's term for what training is that if you're familiar with Elder Scrolls at all, it's basically unlocking the one-handed weapons tree, the archery tree, the heavy armor tree.
Yeah.
If you're going to do the Skyrim stealth archer, it's going to be archery and assassin.
Yeah, so it's classes of weapons more than classes as in, traditional fantasy classes. They currently don't exist in Gateway. The idea is you're building your own character the way you want. So if you want to be the barbarian, you don't have to sort of sacrifice something you just make that your class. And if your druid turns into an animal but doesn't, do tree magic, that's fine.
Yeah.
Be that. Maybe you're a bard that turns into a bear. I don't know. You can do that.
Yeah, go into one skill tree entirely, or just dabble in a bunch of them.
So I think we've kind of gone through character sheet stuff that's a bit nebulous.
We've gone through a bit of ability stuff, which I think is really worthwhile and quite interesting. Combat is a whole thing, which I don't think we need to dive into. Suffice it to say that it is practical and followable and sort of structured
Yeah.
in a way that Cogent just never was.
Yeah, we could give like a little teaser for it at the
All
end,
right,
maybe.
guys. Yeah.
The phases.
But
Yeah, okay. Well, I think sorry, you were gonna
yeah, no, just at the end after this, yeah, maybe we can just give a little tease. We don't have to go into depth, but
Okay.
we could show off a little
Yeah,
bit.
cool.
What would we want to talk about next? Maybe feats?
Probably
Let's do
abilities,
it.
right? Because we talked about abilities a bunch. Like we just went from
True.
training. We keep talking about
Yeah, okay.
unlocking abilities.
Okay.
Wow, abilities is something
Sure.
I've spent a lot of time on.
Yeah.
This is my wheelhouse.
Now-
So basically, every class unlocks a bunch of abilities, and they are referenced on cards.
I just want to add here because I want you to take over, but I just want to point. People go, oh, cards. No, we have to get the cards. We recommend using cards. We include the cards. Feel free to open up the cards PDF to show the cards that we're including.
They're also available not on cards,
Exactly.
wherever that is here.
That's what I was going to say.
So, yes.
So they're in the core rule book. You can all of the abilities that are in cards are in the core rule book. So don't worry.
Just
You can be
picture like the
pick your things.
spell section in the PHB of D&D.
Yeah.
They're all written there, but you can also get reference cards.
Exactly, and the cards are. Open up the cards because they're cool. Open up, go on, just show it because we put a lot of work into that, and it's fun.
Cards are very cool as well to like know what your abilities are and you're not missing them because it's all lumped in with a bunch
I
of
don't even
other
know where the
texts.
cards are.
Yeah.
Isn't
And
that
like
great?
you got them in your hand and you can just go sort through them and go, oh my god, this is perfect for what I want.
What was your first impression with? Have you
With
played
cards?
anything like?
I love cards.
But like before Gateway, have you played any RPGs that sort of use cards?
Not RPGs with cards.
Yeah.
Played a lot of just card games, but not in a way that used roleplay and cards kind
Okay.
of together.
So how did you feel about
I
coming
liked
into it? Like what? Yeah, what was your first experience?
I'm a very visual person, so
Yeah.
it was I found it very helpful. As I said, to know what I was doing, to know what I could do,
Yeah.
and then there's not as much time waiting around for your turn in combat because there's not really, like we'll get into that, but there's not huge turn
Yeah.
system, but it's very easy just to see what your options are.
Yeah.
And I liked that.
And as you can see, there's a lot included in this first launch of the alpha. This is 1/3 of the ability trees, and only a third of 2 of the 5 schools of magic that well, it's not even that much.
So yeah, functionally, just so each skill basically is then subdivided into 3 rough branches of a tree, and
Yeah.
for the alpha, each skill only has 1 branch. So if you feel when you're perusing this, if you're a patron, that like the weapon only is doing one thing, that's because currently it is. However, swords, 2 of the 2 trees are done. So swords, you get a better idea of. There's one that focuses on fighting multiple targets. There's another that's more about dueling. So
Swords
yeah.
are the coolest.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to give an example
Yeah,
of
let's do it.
something?
Yes, please.
Jen, pick a weapon class that you'd like an example from.
Swords.
Swords. The one that was right in front.
I think swords is like the most generic
Yeah.
for most people.
Would you like to hear about a multi-fighting ability or a rapier dueling ability?
Ooh, give me the rapier dueling ability.
Okay, let's go with the one that's sent a screen called Riposte. So this is an ability. This is what it will look like. It has a range on it. It has a cost on the top right. That's the spirit we just talked about. It has what you roll. So that's your combat roll. So it says swords weapon skill. So what that means is you roll your training in swords. That's 1/2. Every single roll in Gateway Roleplay is made the same way. There's no like to hit roll and damage roll where it's different. It's a dice pool. So you grab your swords training, and then the actual sword you're using tells you what to pair it with.
This is so fun.
So in this case, a rapier, I believe, is finesse.
Yeah.
yeah.
So a rapier uses your finesse trait.
I love this.
So
So cool.
in this instance, we are using Al's character. We have 4 in swords and 3 in finesse. So we'd be rolling 7 dice for this attack. And as it says +0, that means we don't get any particular bonus to that roll for this weapon. Now, this weapon,
attack.
this ability called Riposte says defended. And this in this particular example, defended means you succeed any ties, which is great. And you don't take any damage if you succeed any ties or if you beat their roll, but you don't actually do any damage. But what this particular one says is if your target attacked you this turn and missed, aka you won the roll, you deal your weapons damage +1 to them. So this particular card is a very defensive ability where you pay it's for taking the attention of the big bad while you're having this epic sort of sword duel and all the parties doing epic stuff. The charismatic bard jumps on top of the bridge of the pirate ship and challenges Blackbeard to a duel and is now outmatched, but is riposting and parrying and going and doing this long duel while the characters role playing some witty barbs and remarks, and the rest of the party might be dispatching all the lieutenants so they can come in and help. That's exactly what this sort of ability is for.
It's worth saying that the if you tie in a combat roll with someone you're in combat with, both effects apply normally, which is why this one is useful, because it means in a tie, your effect applies. They don't do damage to you. You do
That's what
your
defended
weapon
roll.
damage. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
That sounds really cool, Dave. But how can I get abilities?
Oh, well, to get abilities, you put levels into your training. So, for example, swords. There are 2 requirements for abilities. In the alpha, guess what? There is no requirements because the real reason is we haven't fully developed them yet in a way that seems balanced and fair, but we can't do that until the abilities trees are finished. So it would feel weird to give players 1/3 of the total abilities in a weapon training and then say, and you need to meet requirements to get your access.
Yeah.
When there's the full 3 branches of the tree, it makes sense. They're going to have requirements. So, for example, cleaving someone's head off with an axe might require power or something like that. But using your axe to deflect light into their eyeballs and blind them might require intelligence or wisdom. These are just off the cuff. So all you need to do is meet the requirements and have enough training in the tier to equal the spirit cost. So this one has a spirit cost of 2, so you would need swords 2, and you automatically unlock all of the skills that you meet the requirements for. You don't have to buy them. And then based on your mind, based on your hand size of the amount of things you can keep in your head, you basically build your list, like preparing your list of maneuvers or building your hand if you're using cards. Each day you can do this, and then you effectively have the abilities you have access to. And if you have multiple trainings, you have to kind of pick between them. You also get the 0 cost ones for free. They get added to your hand as freebies.
Cool. So you're going to have...
every weapon has a free ability. Every single weapon. So you always
can...
can...
the swords example?
Yeah. So even though these all cost stuff, everything has a freebie.
So I was going to actually touch on that. So basically we think of it as like your hand. When you have a hand in Pokemon, you can have up to a certain amount of cards or whatever, right? So your hand in this case... is what you'd refer to as your active skill limit. So it's kind of like if in D&D you're a wizard or sorcerer or whatever, you can learn a certain amount of spells that you can cast. In this case, with any training, you have a certain amount of abilities that you can have ready to go. You can change those if you want in a rest period. But otherwise, you sort of construct your hand based on the training you have. And your hand limit is your total attribute points plus mind. So let's say if you have 2 in each, that would be 6.
Yeah.
That's not including 0
Plus
cost
the freebies.
abilities. So you have 4 freebies, which we can scroll up to in a minute. And then in this case, let's say we're training swords. You also get the 5th one, which is the free one for swords, meaning then I have 6 other abilities, that I can fill my hand with. That aren't the free ones.
What we really love about this is that from many, many years of playing games, so many times combat turns into I attack, I attack, I attack, I attack, I attack. Players who might be down on resources begin to feel the same. And with weapon systems where the weapons deal a very similar amount of damage, it's just like I attack and deal 1d8 damage plus modifier. I attack and deal 1d8. So instead, this means that every player with their different weapons, even when they're completely tapped out of resources, have the option to use their weapon-specific freebie ability, which always has a vibe. So the vibe for swords is it allows you to attack multiple targets with a single attack at a penalty to your combat roll. So really good for dispatching lots of weak enemies, not so good for fighting bosses. But conversely, other skills have different things that better represent how that weapon is supposed to be used or what its advantages are. Then there's also the freebie ones, such as reckless or cautious attack. So you've always got multiple options in how you're fighting. Every turn, you get to make decisions and change the way you play. Are you being more aggressive, defensive?
Do you want to show the 4 zero cost?
So that's...
And there's also not one weapon that's just better than all of them.
No.
Or has a
Hopefully
better
not.
dice.
If there is, tell us and we'll fix it.
So there's a bit of like good and bad for everything. A bit of
Yeah.
flavor for everything as well.
So these abilities, these combat abilities that cost 0 spirit, everyone has without training, without anything, without weapons. You can charge, you can cautious attack, reckless attack, or what's the other one? It's withdraw. Which is great because it means you always have an option. None of them are just I attack. Well, how do you attack? I charge in an attack, or I very carefully attack.
Yeah.
So it sort of already institutes that sort of flavor, and then it all builds off on top of that. Also, sorry, there was a comment in the chat. Kicks a Cereal says, give us a trident/net combo example like a gladiator. So there are reach weapons that are one-handed reach weapons. So you could ask the GM, I want to use the stats of a pilum or a spear.
And call it a trident. That's
Great.
like a throwing spear for
Yeah,
sure.
cool.
Yeah.
So you sort of stat that out. Then you pick your abilities for reach weapons, and then you could have an offhand thing that might be more martial weapons based, or that whatever we develop over time that could be a sort of a supporting item, or supporting weapon style or combat style in addition to your reach weapon.
Yeah,
So
you won't be able to do literally everything that's ever existed in the world in the alpha, but that sounds very setting specific.
And it's also
Roman
provide
era gladiator tree.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to be able to add to this and just create new weapon classes and new
and the
trees.
community is. I've created a GM handbook that has blank stuff in there. So fill in blank cards, blank
Very
creatures, blank
homebrew
weapons.
friendly.
Very.
To fix it in
Yeah.
put it into your world.
It would be so easy for the person who suggested that to make a net
Yeah.
sort of weapon and then a net school of combat. We've made the weapon the weapon, what do you call it, template. So you can actually fill in the weapon stats that we've provided, and then you can make your weapon skill tree with the card templates that we've provided. So it is very homebrew friendly.
There's a lot of depth we could go into with there. I think we probably...
Yeah.
Do we show a weapon and then you kind of get an idea of a weapon and then we move on to something else?
Yeah, let's do that.
So...
Because weapons have requirements as well.
And I think as we look
Should
through
we show
all
a
of
sword?
these,
Because we've talked about swords a lot.
Yeah.
as we look through these, keep in mind not only the combination of the abilities that you choose, but these weapons as they're started out. Compare that to longsword.
I want to read...
Longsword +1.
I want to read a developer's note because it's good. The naming convention for the weapons is currently oh, I don't agree with that. Oh, get that. What? You changed the text! No, okay, let me just reword this. The naming convention for the weapons is perfect and we don't need to change it.
It's been a little bit of dev fight.
Basically, yeah, this is one thing we wholeheartedly disagree on, so give us feedback. I have created a system where the names of the weapons roughly represent historical like quality in real life, technology, how things advanced, and would be a really good just placeholder for people who don't know much about stuff to just throw in there. But I would suggest that if anyone wants to reflavor them or rename them, you would do that. Or we could call them Sword 1, 2, or 3.
Well, as an actual
I'm not
example.
fighting for either.
I'm just
I'm not like saying I don't.
I am fighting. I am definitely fighting for one half. Okay. Sorry, you're not fighting for it.
No, I like to keep it in a place where we find the right place. So like, it needs to be as functional as possible, but flavor really matters too.
Yeah, I think, and so this had the flavor, but it was also with the caveat of being like a suggestion. So when I was creating my character, I wanted to have a rapier, but I don't meet all the requirements, which is like 4 deft of hand and 4 coordination. I only had 3 coordination, so I can get a side sword. So if I wanted, I could say it kind of looks like a rapier.
I think then I showed you a picture of a side sword and you went, oh, that looks like a rapier.
Yeah, but for this example, I could call it a rapier and still have those stats, or it gives me something to work towards to get the higher tier.
My
full
weapon is
coordination.
stats of great club, but I'm saying like I have a stone splitting hammer.
Yeah. So there's room for that kind
The
of
thing I was
flavor.
getting really excited about before when talking about swords is, as you can see, we've got these 3 groups. Swords that require reflex in your role, swords that require finesse in your role, which I was using in the upcoming campaign, and then swords that require strength in your role. They're all swords. And in a lot of games, they all are treated the same. And they should not be treated the same.
And Tickle Duck has once again said something along the lines of make them amateur, adept, master, or make them rusty, strong, whatever. The reason we don't want to do that is also a system that is also going to be there. So quality of weapons is going to be a modifier to this.
Yes.
So you then have a masterwork
side
sword. Yeah. So that's why it either has to be like sword class 1, 2, or 3, or it needs to have names, and you can just change the names. If we do that, then we can't have adamantian masterwork side swords, and we want adamantian masterwork.
Yeah, we want that.
So that's a thing already. In theory, that's a theoretical thing.
Very layered and satisfying how you can.
We've got a question about
do
weight.
lots.
I just have to. Show me the bastard sword? It should be 1.5 handed, not just 2 handed. So if you see here the bastard sword down here, it says versatile, and the bastard sword can be wielded in 1 hand or 2 hands, and if it's wielded in 2 hands, it does 1 more damage. So yeah. I'm like, yes, I preempted it. I know how bastard swords work.
We also have a question about burden and how weight works for weapons.
So burden is.
Well, we can get to it later.
Well, we can segue to burden, but showing off swords.
Yeah, you want to show the sword first.
Segue
Fun to talk about all of it.
You can sort of see. That basically swords are all slightly different. They all have different requirements. So the weapons, you can see agility, deft of hand, power, which is going to indicate what kind of weapons your character can use. There are also variously. A great example is this spather here, which is a low weapon. So this spather, on face value, only does 2 damage, and the straight blade, the arming sword, does 3 damage. So why would I take the spather? Well, the spather uses finesse, and it has pierce 2, and pierce basically ignores up to that amount of armor, so it just slides through it. So against lightly armored foes who might have 1 or 2 defense, especially 2 defense, the spather is actually going to be superior to the arming sword, which can't get any damage in. But the arming sword is generally going to be better against unarmored opponents.
They do have different skill requirements as well, so it depends on how you want to build your character.
So weapons, there's a lot to them, but burden is the system by which you carry items, which is probably one of the rawest, newest, and freshest parts of the game.
It has yet to be play tested, and it's one of the things where our approach to it is there's a level of gamification that is really fun and satisfying, but there is a point at which it just becomes cumbersome and annoying, and we really want to try and walk that line where it's just like, oh, it's satisfying, when it's like, okay, I have 2 burden left in my inventory. We all came across this pile of gold, and I could carry 3 burden worth of gold. Do I drop an item and carry the gold, or do I sacrifice some of the gold? It just makes a little game out of that in a moment, but it's not like 80 pounds and 7 pounds.
Not super maxy.
Exactly. It's just
more
like a really
slots.
simple. Yeah,
I think of it in my dev brain as Resident Evil, where you have your 6 or 8,
where they take up a certain number of squares.
Yeah, exactly. So any of those systems where you kind of have to slot things in, and then Resident Evil works really well because there's a small number, like 8, for example, and some items take up 2 slots. Like you have a shotgun and it's big and it uses 2 hands, so it's 2. Burden's similar. A lot of big, like the Claymore is 2 burden, and it basically, if it's 1-handed, it's 1. It's 2-handed, it's 2 burden, but then you got other stuff, and
that is a good example. I haven't played Resident Evil.
Yeah, Diablo is a good example. Diablo really is a good example. Resident Evil is just the perfect example because it was an inspiration. So
I'm really excited about items and gear.
Tell us about them.
But I feel like we've skipped feats.
I want to talk
There is
about
so
feats.
much. It's so
much.
fun.
We've talked enough about feats tonight.
Have we? No, we haven't.
We
We
haven't
haven't spoken
Oh, Dave!
Ella's jumping at the bit here.
Okay, all right.
I want to talk.
Go on.
Do we briefly mention
feats.
backpacks and feats, or because we're on burden now?
Okay.
He did
We're on
talk
burden.
about burden.
Oh, are we done with burden?
Well, I mean, backpacks.
I think we
Backpacks
should
are fun.
mention the backpacks and move on to feats.
Okay,
Go.
backpacks are cool. They let you do
Backpacks are
different
very
stuff,
cool.
but you can only have one backpack because they weigh a lot. But when you're wearing them, they have a burden cost of 0, and they allow you to do cool stuff, and the party gets to think about stuff. So, for example, a tent and bedrolls for the party, providing shelter and bedding for the party, allows you to take long rests in the wilderness, etc. Someone picks that pack, and that provides it for the party. Someone might pick the adventuring pack, which has torches and stuff for the whole party. So the more stuff that gets added, there'll be like, there's a smithy pack, which allows you to do better
probably
repairs.
brainstorm together at the start.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, I'll get the adventurers pack if you get the tent and bedding or whatever it is. So everyone's sort of contributing in a different way. But there may be situations where you're forced to drop something and run, and it might be the party's tent and bedding, and you have to figure out, how you're going to get rest, or, so it provides interesting ways for adventuring to feel like a system where it's not just like,
Hey, maybe you just want to carry more stuff, so you take a backpack.
Yeah.
It literally just gives you more space for loot.
Very important.
Yeah, empty backpack.
Okay. So feats.
Yes.
Starting feats.
Okay.
character creation
So
feats.
you get one free starting feat, and these feats you can only get at the start of your character creation. So it helps add like kind of your character's background a bit, or what they're really good at, maybe what they're like naturally good at. And then there was a second page, if you can scroll down.
That was a cue.
Of something called, that was my cue voice, of something called
was an L.
disabling feats. Haha. And so with these, for every disabling feat you can take another starting feat, just to kind of balance it out. But these are really cool. They add a bit of character flavor. So for example, if you're really clumsy, you might be really bad at deft of hand, and so you'd have to roll disadvantage with that. If you're distractible, you roll disadvantage on acuity checks, that kind of thing. So it adds a bit of cool flavor if you like making characters with some flaws, and then you get something cool out of it as well. And maybe just to get Dave to scroll back up to the other page, I'll show you my favorite feat, which is no boundaries.
Thank you.
It's
And
the
that's
best
one of mine.
one.
Jasmine made so many of these. We all made a bunch together, and I will say we had a good brainstorming session. But
my favorite.
That was my favorite, like light bulb moment.
Yeah. So basically, you just roll with advantage to bash down doors.
Yeah.
Well,
And
see,
it's called no boundaries.
It gives you a really clear idea of someone's personality.
Yeah, I love it.
well, we said these all have to be things that you could have either learned in early life and have as a formative experience, or be something that's just a personality trait.
Wow,
and I'm like, what is the definition of someone who likes to break down doors? I'm like, no boundaries.
Yep.
Mum's on the toilet, the door just opens. There they are. Like the classic.
Walks in when someone's just getting out of bed. Whoa.
Yep. Morning. One toy thrown at him.
Yeah, so there are lots of really cool options here. And there are also feats later down the road that you can get. So they're slightly different to the starting ones, but they cost XP. So you're kind of spending to get them, and they're a bit stronger, but they also have skill requirements.
Yeah.
Disabling feats are there will be people who recognize a familiarity with the idea of disabling characteristics in Cogent. However, that was and there's a lot of fondness for that. I think there were a lot of people who liked the idea of it, but the problem is in Cogent it was based on a roll. If you wanted 2 extra skill points, otherwise you just pick one and get an extra skill point. And it was too swingy and really uncontrolled and didn't really add a lot of flavor. And they either ended up not mattering or mattering way too much. Whereas this is a really nice counterbalanced way to you choose them, you get the same result either way, and they're really balanced and they feel really character driven. So I think they're really fun. They're actually modeled from my perspective on Project Zomboid, where for me a lot of the game is building your character, choosing the negative things and the positive things, because you can't have a naturally better than everyone character. You have to be a normal person. So it's like, well, I'll take these negatives so I can take some positives. And that's kind of fun in of itself. And then in this case, it adds to the role play feel. You're building a character that feels like they are a personality.
Joy of creating characters.
Yeah. So feats that cost things. Do you want to scroll down? We'll just see a few examples of those and then we'll move on. So a lot of these are kind of like you could consider professions. They're basically things that you can learn and they can be bought. So you can adopt the ability to be an armorer, meaning you have the ability to repair armor in your rest action with a bit more effect.
And a bit of an improved armor.
But Mr. Jazzo, it looks like some of these have some requirements in terms of skills and stats.
They do. That's because they have requirements in terms of skills and stats.
Yeah.
So the XP cost is on the left. So if I want to take on Ranger, costs 2 XP, but I have to at least have 3 in survival and 3 in agility. And then if I do, and I buy that, then I get an advantage to survival and agility checks when in the wilderness.
So these are all things that you can aim for to further craft your character.
Yeah. You might be able to get them if you want to push your character in a very particular direction at character creation. It is possible to get a bunch of them. Some of them are very difficult to get at character creation. But we have questions coming in thick and fast. Are checks used in combats? They can be. There's a special kind of combat action. It does confer a disadvantage where you might be more likely to get hit, but you can do stuff. And can you select things that cancel each other out, or is it not possible? Generally, it should be impossible. We've tried to do that.
So there is like one starting free feat where you're wealthy and you have double the amount of money you can start with, and then there's a disabling feat where you have half the amount of money you start with. Obviously, you wouldn't pick those together. Yeah. So there are some that would cancel out, and those shouldn't be chosen together. But I think those are kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much anything that, starting feats and disabling feats are meant to represent, personality traits more than the rest of the feats are representing like learned preferences through your life. AKA, I'm a bit of a guardian. I protect people. I'm a bit of an explorer. I'm an athlete. I've trained a lot. I'm a guide. I'm a cook. I'm a musician. They feel like jobs, right? Whereas the starting feats are more, I'm attuned. I have iron guts. I'm slippery with a lowercase s. I'm artistic. I'm nimble. It's more traits about the person.
Yes,
You're
please.
so slippery. The capital letter slipped away from the alpha.
Please do feel free to let us know of spelling mistakes and things that need to be fixed.
Honestly, Jazza and Dave have done so much work on this, like putting all of this together. So considering that there's only a few typos that we have so far spotted is actually pretty good for an alpha.
Thank you.
I've seen more typos in university textbooks. You're good.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's kind of the meat and potatoes of everything, unless there's anything we've missed.
really
We haven't touched
combat.
armor.
Yeah, there's armor.
Okay.
Combat.
You know what? Very briefly, armor. Armor is a flat negation of damage. So if you do 3 damage and they have 3 armor, you do 0 damage.
And there are 2. There's another.
up here.
There's kind of like 2 HP meters of armor. There's the armor value itself. Then there's also durability. So you might have armor that has a lower defense, but also a higher durability, meaning.
Currently that doesn't exist, but I like the idea and I wish I'd thought of it before I did the alpha.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Damn.
do you want to scroll down to some of the armor examples?
That's a great idea, Jazz.
Okay. So what's the purpose of that, Dave?
Of durability.
Yeah.
So there's a rule called break. A break is your ability to destroy a target's armor. Mostly it's actually on blunt weapons. However, the monsters in the world have a lot more access to break than the players do because monsters in general have lower armor than players. So break basically degrades your armor and reduces its ability to defend. And as I said, it's a 1-to-1. So if you do 3 damage and they have 3 armor, you do no damage to them. If you do 3 damage and they have 2 armor, you do 1 damage to them. If you do 3 damage and they have 3 armor and you have break 1, you do no damage to them. But then at the end of that turn, they lose 1 armor permanently. Durability is health for your armor. So you lose durability before you lose armor value, basically.
So where break might apply, so if a devastating attack from an enemy deals 2 break to your armor and you have 2 armor, well, if you have 2 durability, it deals it to that first. So you still have your 2 armor, but you're looking shaky.
And armor is distinct from your defense. So your defense is gained from your defense plus your something. Is it natural defense? I forget.
Yeah, but it's uncommon. So it's basically like if you want to create a species that has like
or an
leathery
ability
hide skin or a feat.
Oftentimes abilities, like literally combat abilities, might add to your defense, not your armor, because it can't be removed. So there's armor plus defense is your total defense. Like being super agile, for example, might give you extra defense that's unremovable armor. Anyway, example being these pieces of armor.
There you go. And you'll see little developer notes here and there saying, we're going to come back and finish this bit. So in this case, it's requirements for armor, but you can play with that for now. I think that really covers the meat and potatoes of it, like you said.
Yeah.
Can we do a quick tiny touch on combat?
Let's
Just
do it.
to say
yeah,
that
and in fact, there's the whole
I think just
chain
to
of
say
action
like
and
there's
stuff.
there's not like you're not rolling for initiative. There's like a specific order of there's the movement time and then there's like your action time. So during movement, the enemies move first, then the players can choose where to move, and then if there's a leader, which is like someone who kind of has more powerful abilities and kind of leads the enemies. They're not always there, but if they're there, then they move last. And then during the action phase, the leader gets to go first if they're there, then the players, and then the enemies. And then after that is when the damage is all applied, and then any conditions that, like, for example, break, then they would be applied as well.
So now, in terms of the order that Elle was referencing, that's the order of first priority. Then whoever has the first priority makes their action, and combat takes place rather than in an initiative system. It takes place in what we call a chain of action. So let's say there's no leader in combat. The party gets to go first. As a party, we go, all right, who's going to make the first move? And if we decide, okay, it's going to be Murray, because we want to get that certain attack, or he needs to avoid being targeted, and his ability says he can slip away without being targeted for the round, right?
Yeah, maybe I'm the assassin, maybe I'm the archer, I'm going to strike the first blow, maybe I'm the tank, I need to take everyone's attention.
Perfect. So you're sort of deciding as a group, what is our...
There is first strike abilities in the assassins things where they get bonuses for being the first thing in the chain of action.
There you go.
Yeah.
There is also an equivalent to sneak that's not stupid, which is called skulk.
Yeah.
And it means it's basically you are unseen if you're a certain distance from enemies and you haven't been targeted.
And you have to actively do it every turn
You
to
have to be
continue to
focusing
skulk
on it.
around.
Yeah.
But then you can't be targeted.
So you can't do other things while you're doing it, and you have to be a certain distance.
And you
all
do
that
get
stuff.
it. You can use abilities that give you a bonus for breaking out of it with an attack,
Yeah.
but it's you have to maintain it.
Yeah. So the idea is, let's say Murray goes first and targets one of the specific monsters. What's happened is he's targeted a monster who is then pulled into the chain of action. So it's hands it
I'm Goblin Bob.
to the GM, who then gets to
Goblin Bob is now forced to choose. He's been dragged into it. But Goblin Bob now has to decide what Goblin Bob is doing. But Goblin Bob does not have to attack Murray's character. Goblin Bob can attack Fred, which would then pull Fred into the chain of action. Fred is, of course, being played by Jen. So
Respectively.
then Jen would decide what she's doing, and it kind of goes like this. And once everyone's decided what they're doing, anyone who wants to interact with any of those characters has to declare now at the end. So you then get an opportunity to jump in, and if no one says yes, everyone rolls, determines what happens, and then you kind of look, is there anyone left? Oh, Al hasn't attacked and Goblin Sam hasn't fought. So Al goes, well, I've been saving my attack for Goblin Sam. And then
like a new chain of action begins and result.
But no one involved in that can interact with that original chain of action anymore. Your opportunity in this turn to deal with them is now gone. So
And the idea is this enables not only everything to be resolved simultaneously in a sort of controllable way and a sort of like understandable way without like keeping track of huge initiative rows, and like that also doesn't make a huge amount of sense. It allows for like pockets of action that makes sense on a battlefield where if like there's three people fighting over here, and then there's a ranged person who's fighting with their ranged person and they're trying to take each other out. Like often you'll get these clusters that are focusing in on themselves rather than this free for all where everyone is attacking everyone. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So it allows you to break up the action into chunks that resolve in and of themselves.
I think it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but I encourage people to be open-minded to try it. It might change in the future if we decide we don't like it once we get into big fights. But I think there are a lot of advantages, as you mentioned, Jazza, but also the advantage of combat happens simultaneously, which means that like no one gets denied their opportunity to act.
Yep.
So if you wanted to do that big thing, and because you're at a high level encounter, the GM has put some boss and it just points at you and downs you, you didn't get to act. Well, you do, because you still get to do your action simultaneously to the boss, or at least have a right of refusal, a right of response.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
Is that
Did we do it?
I think look, there's so much going on. I will say one other thing that we haven't put a note on that is missing from the entire rulebook is this is the mechanics. it is missing the flair.
Yeah.
Like we obviously want in a final release to have like a little description for each of the items, so you know what is a haubergeon. Does anyone know? Anyone know what a lamellar suit is?
Pictures and
Do you know what a Bernie is?
No.
Okay. Well, we're all going to learn with Dave. We're all going to learn with Dave as we.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into it right now, but
Learn with Dave.
Our dream
trademarked.
is to not only fill this out to be amazingly robust with all the possibilities of content, but also have gorgeous art and just to be a system that begs to be played. And to do that, we need your support. So if you become a patron, not only do you get early access and get to contribute to making it the best game ever, you help us make it the best game ever by allowing us to put more into it.
Support us.
And we certainly appreciate that.
Cool. What's anything else? How do we earn XP in this?
You play a game. Wow. And then at the end of the session, you get an XP.
Hell yeah.
It's really
look,
linear and simple.
I had a thought because I felt generous like Santa Claus, which is very rare for me.
Who is he?
And I thought maybe one day we'll look at a little box that attaches to the side of EXP called bonus EXP, and the GM can grant it to you. But my caveat is I don't want it to tick towards your levels.
Yeah.
Is that sort of makes sense? So it's like a little box where you can be like, everyone gets a bonus EXP tonight, you beat the boss.
Just
Great.
spend something.
Or because that you might just be you get an extra one to level up, but it's more like great role play tonight. I want to give you all a bonus experience. It doesn't check off, so it doesn't level you up faster, but you can just spend it on something.
Yeah.
Maybe. I should have said that before we put the alpha out, but I didn't because Santa denies as much as he gives.
He is making a list.
There's heaps.
Putting the
Yes.
sand in
There's
Santa.
heaps we didn't have time to go into, but it is all laid out. I think that the thing I'm really proud of is that we're very aware of all the stuff we want to add to it. It's pretty well rounded and there's a lot here to jump into, and we are really excited to hear feedback from anyone who sinks their teeth into it, because that's the best way we're going to learn from everyone's experience to make it even better. And I'm excited to play it, honestly. It's been fun to build it, but like the thing I'm most excited about is like we have lists of items and weapons and abilities and we're playing in 2 weeks' time.
And next week, you are all going to be introducing everyone to your characters as we do our character and world intro.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
We've given some tidbits today. We've given some teasers.
Yeah.
We got Jazz's incorrect character sheet. It's the best teaser there is.
Yes. So we should go. Also, final reminder, this is your last chance to get the Pokemon poster. It isn't full of holes. This is just the green screen keying out any green in the poster. But we are hand signing these. So it's your last chance to get the hand signed version, because next week is the beginning of the world of Lucevera.
Sort of. I mean, we're not playing next week.
Beginning
but
of
yes.
the world. My wording.
The
I'm going to
birth
start
of the
making it
world.
next week. Oof. Okay.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later.